Are you getting ready to set up your very first Caridina tank, but you're not quite sure which method to go for? Well, stick around because this video is for you. My name is Tristan, for those of you that are new here, and in this video, we're going to be talking about how to set up a Caridina tank, but not only that, we're going to cover each and every different method that you could use to set one up. Plus, we're also going to talk about the pros and cons to these different methods. By the end of this video, you should be confident in picking a method that's going to work well for your setup. So without any further ado, let's jump straight into it. I just want to say a quick little disclaimer that we're specifically going to be focusing on Caridina tank setups. So this is utilizing an active soil which buffers the pH inside the tank when you're running it. Now, for the purposes of this video, we're just going to be assuming that everyone is using a basic little sponge filter like this, which most people do when it comes to breeding Caridina. I will make a separate video on filtration itself. This one, I want to focus on just the substrate and how that interacts with the water. The main differences that we're going to focus on when it comes to the pros and cons is the cycle time or the setup time. So how long it takes from when you put water in your tank the very first day to the point where the tank is cycled and the environment is stable enough for you to be able to put your Caridina shrimp in the tank. The next thing that we want to look at is how long that tank is going to last. So from when you put your shrimp in to the point where you need to either do a soft or a hard reset. Basically, this is going to be the point where the soil is no longer capable of actively buffering the pH in the water and maintaining that environment for the Caridina shrimp. And then lastly, the one other thing that we want to look at is the risks associated with the different methods when it comes to keeping these Caridinas. And the reason I say risks is because they're very sensitive shrimp. And the two main things that we want to look out for in a tank like this is ammonia spikes and detritus buildup. Now, some of these methods are more effective than others when it comes to managing or mitigating those risks. Each method's got its own place, and that's why we're going to talk about them in detail. So the first method we're going to speak about is having a substrate layer within your tank. Now, I think this is probably the most well-known, if not the most popular way of setting up a Caridina tank. And essentially, if it's not self-explanatory enough, all you need to do is take your active soil, throw it in the tank, and basically cover the bottom piece of glass. Now, there's two variations of doing this. Some guys like to use a very, very thin layer of substrate, and some guys go for a thicker layer of substrate. I think it's pretty obvious that the thin layer of soil is going to cycle a lot faster. It's not going to last as long because you actually have less volume of soil in the tank. And it's going to completely eliminate any type of ammonia or detritus buildup because there's simply no space for that stuff to go and hide. With a thicker layer of substrate, you are going to be a little bit more at risk for ammonia spikes and pockets within that substrate layer, and you're going to have to be a little bit more on top of your maintenance to make sure that you don't have a large buildup of detritus. However, that being said, the tank's going to last a lot longer because you have a larger volume of active soil capable of buffering the water in the tank. But it's also going to take longer to cycle when you initially set it up. So personally, if you want to go for this method, I would recommend that you decide what kind of a shrimp keeper you're going to be and then choose the variation that's going to work best for you. If you're just a hobbyist shrimp keeper and you've got one or two tanks, I would probably recommend going for the thicker substrate. However, if you're someone like me and you've got multiple tanks with lots of space to move your shrimp around and you're specifically focused on breeding higher quantities of shrimp, you probably won't mind resetting your tanks on a more regular basis. And when you do that, you've obviously got the space to move the shrimp around. Right, so the second method that we're going to speak about today is the very common and very popular UGF box. Now, if you don't know what this is, it basically stands for Undergravel filter, which is a very old school method of running filtration in fish tanks. It's been readapted or adapted for running Caridina tanks, and there's two different variations. You can basically get a little UGF box like this that is an accessory to your tank, or you can actually build the box within your tank by adding a piece of glass, installing your filter in there, and then adding your substrate directly into the tank. The main pros and cons between those two different variations is that this one is really easy to clean and maintain because you can physically remove it from the tank. The one inside the tank is going to result in a hard reset if you ever need to do any maintenance on that. Speaking of maintenance, there are a couple of things that you need to be made aware of and that I want you to consider before you choose this method for running your tank. Now, I'm not saying that it's a bad method. It's actually a really good one. It's something that I personally use in probably 80% of the tanks that I'm running on my side over here. But the things that I want you guys to consider is that this is not an inert piece of equipment. You don't just put your soil in here and chuck it in the tank and forget about it. It's actually essentially a mechanical filter. So whether you're using a little 3D printed piece to push the air through the pipe, or you're using a little air stone. Either way, you have to have mechanical air filtration running through this device to create the Venturi effect that pulls the water through the substrate. And the reason that that's so important is because it creates additional failure points within the tank, especially if you're running it at scale. You could potentially have a blocked air stone, your filter could get blocked. The other thing that you need to consider is that you could potentially lower the life expectancy of your substrate or your soil, specifically if you're using a very soft soil. Recently, I've started doing some tests with ADA soil, and some of the soils are very, very soft. And obviously running them in a filter like this, where you're constantly pulling water through it, could potentially end up with a situation where your soil is either getting compacted or it's turning into like a fine dust, like a type of mud. And that's obviously not going to be ideal inside your tank. A lot of guys add some sponge to try and mitigate these effects, and there are multiple ways of managing that, mixing soils. Last but not least, your cycle time is going to be a little bit longer because you have more soil. Even though you've got the water flowing through there, it is going to take a bit longer. However, it's going to last a lot longer than having a thin layer of substrate. Plus, it's going to be super effective at keeping the pH stable within your tank. Not only that, but you're also going to have additional space for beneficial bacteria. So there really are a lot of pros when it comes to using this method of setting up your tank. However, I just want you guys to consider the cons, or the potential cons that you could run into, especially if you're someone like me and you're running an operation at scale. Moving on to the last but probably the most uncommon way of running a Caridina tank, and that is what I like to jokingly call the in trouble with your wife method. And essentially the reason I say that is because you're going to be stealing socks and essentially pantyhose to create a little hanging basket that you put your soil into. And essentially what you do with this is clip it to the side of your tank, and you basically just hang that inside the water column. Now, this originally came from the guys in Germany. Not too quite sure, but I know that Niku was one of the guys from Garnelio is the guy that I got this from, the idea originally. And recently it has been updated to a more modern version, if you want to call that. That's where guys are using plastic boxes like these with lots of holes. It's basically just a Perspex version of the sock, where you have a little container that holds all of your aqua soil. It's got tons of little holes all around it, and this allows it to buffer the water column while being inside the tank. And the biggest perk to this is that it's super easy to manage when it comes to removing and replacing it in your tank. Essentially what the guys like to do is they'll run their sock or their reset basket in a separate container and cycle that soil prior to having to reset one of their main tanks that actually contains a shrimp colony. Essentially, when that time comes, all you need to do is remove the sock that has been spent and put in the brand new one with your new cycled soil, and theoretically you'd be able to run that tank indefinitely. Personally, I think this is a little bit risky, and I would probably only recommend it for more experienced keepers that are able to determine whether or not their shrimp are doing well and make the necessary adjustments should there be something wrong in the tank. Although I don't particularly believe that it's going to be as effective as something like a UGF when it comes to buffering the substrate in, or to buffering the water in your tank, I do think it's going to last a lot longer, and it's going to completely mitigate any potential ammonia spikes and detritus buildup issues that you would normally have with something like a UGF or a substrate layer at the bottom of the tank. Well guys, that brings us to the end of this video. I really hope that it was informative and that you could learn something from it. But as always, if there's something that you think I might have left out, or you have any questions for me that are more specific, please don't hesitate to leave them down below in a comment. If you enjoyed watching this video, consider leaving it a like. It helps it reach other people that are interested in these type of topics. And as always, if you haven't yet, make sure you hit that subscribe button to stay up to date on future videos. If you already have, you're awesome. Continue being awesome, and I'll see you guys in the next video.